In the next video in our foam rolling discussion, this time we're going to be talking about back pain. Back pain is not necessarily a back injury, so what we want to do is we want to look at some of the things that could be causing that back pain and some of the corrective action that we can take to fix it. As we mentioned before, the simplest solution is often the best solution. Also, when we look at corrective action like this, this is our responsibility. The same way that we would be responsible for at the user-owner level of taking care of equipment, vehicles, anything like that. This is user-owner responsibility right here. So finding some landmarks, if we look at the glutes, we look at the hips, and we can see that the hip and pelvis area, this is a big solid mass of bone. Okay, this is a very strong supportive structure. And then the movement arm is that femur coming up and attaching into the pelvis right there. And again, this is a long, strong lever arm right here. Because of that, because we have all this anchor point, because we have such a solid mass of bone, because we have such a strong working arm, we can get a lot of muscle attachment going on in there. So underneath the glutes, if we go behind glute maximus, medius, and minimus, we have the piriformis and a few other smaller support muscles. And you can see that they're attaching to the head of the femur and they're fanning out and attaching onto the lower portion of the pelvis right there. Now, if those muscles get tight, if those muscles are adhesed and they're not working well, we're losing range of motion and mobility in the hips. So in order to, the problem with that is, as we lose mobility here, we're trying to gain and find mobility further up that kinetic chain. In this case, we're going to find it in the lumbar region of the spine. Now, the lumbar region of the spine, those discs are basically just a stack of teacups stacked up on top of one another, and you've only got so much movement in there. Because we only have that small support structure from the skeletal system, we rely on the muscle system of the core to keep things stable. So if we have mobility here in the pelvis, we actually want stability in the lumbar region of the spine. If we don't, if that piriformis is locked up, if the hamstrings are tight, we lose mobility at the hips, then we wind up going through flexion and extension of the lumbar region of the spine, and we start to use some of the smaller erector muscles for that lifting through flexion extension. And then we wind up with pain. So if we have that kind of problem, what we want to do is we want to get on that lacrosse ball or some other hard surface and start to dig in there and loosen up and find that adhesed area and start mashing around and loosening that tissue up. So starting with the piriformis, working your way around the end of that femur. This is why we would want to sit semi-cross-legged, crossing one ankle over the opposite knee, open that hip up and dig around in there. We also want to look at the hamstrings. So if we look at those big muscles coming down from underneath the glutes, when they get tight, that's also going to restrict the mobility of the hips. So spending some time on that piriformis, spending some time on the hamstrings will help bring mobility back into the hips, which is going to alleviate a lot of back pain. Okay, so that's how we're going to use lacrosse ball. That's how we're going to use that corrective action at the user-owner level to fix things before it becomes a bigger problem and we have breakdown. All right, again, any questions, leave them in the comments section below. We'll try and get to them. We'll try and get to the shoulders next, which is going to get even more complicated. So stick around, come back soon.